Hello and welcome to Atheist Torah study. My name is Emma. I am on a year-long exploration of the Jewish Torah from the perspective of an atheist. Um, I'm almost to the end. We're getting very close to the end. We're in the book of Devarim. So today we're going to be reading the second Parsha in the book of Devarim. A Parsha is just It's like usually like a name given to three or four chapters of the Bible. Um, Parsha Devarim is the second Parsha in the book of Devarim, also called Deuteronomy. And it is, let's see, I got the stats on it. It is Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 23 through chapter 7, verse 11. And it is well, I don't have the exact number here, but I think it's the 44th or 45th Parsha in the Torah. Um, I guess what are some of the important things about this? Moses pleads with God to enter the promised land. Um, Moses tells the Jews to obey the Torah. Moses warns against idolatry. Moses talks about the three cities of refuge. Moses teaches the Ten Commandments again. Moses teaches the Shema, which is Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And Moses warns people not to adopt the religious practices of the nations they will encounter. So those are all really good. I mean, I think that from an atheist perspective, I mean, there's a lot in this portion for an atheist to kind of look at. It's actually pretty atheist rich in terms of its content. So why don't we get into it? I'm gonna start with last week. I said, well, actually, I'm gonna start with the beginning because last week I really wanted to do it, but now I don't want to do it. By the way, I just want to say I really do love this Torah portion. I mean, there's some parts of the Torah that are like just not very easy to read. I mean, it's not good literature. It's not really very interesting. There's really not that much to think about. But this part of the Torah, it's actually really interesting to me. I mean, as an atheist, I find a lot here that I could kind of bounce off of. And I mean, I think that's like, I mean, I think atheists, that's kind of what we're doing. We're like, we're bouncing off of the religions of the dominant cultures where we live. So, I mean, I know Judaism isn't the dominant culture. It's just the monotheistic tradition more generally. But I mean, regardless of what tradition it is, it's like we're bouncing off of the scripts that our culture has written. And those scripts are sort of accepted generally as kind of the undergirding foundation of our society. Um, and here in America, where I live, I mean, we basically have two scripts. We have religion and we have nationalism. And although over time there's kind of been like more scripts written. I mean, I think that probably the script that actually underlies both religion and nationalism in American culture is just I'm not sure how to put it. It's like it's a market-based economy. And so like, everything that we do in the culture in which we live in, it's primarily driven by markets. And I mean, I guess that's always been somewhat true of human existence, but I don't know if it's ever been quite so true as it is now. And so we have this kind of this idea that the whole world is a marketplace and that like everything but I don't know if that's any different from how existence has always been. I think that we've always been a fairly mercantile species ever since we invented money. So I don't really know if that is a good descriptor. I mean, anyways, I don't know. Mostly I want to talk about what's in the Torah. So why don't we get started? I'll probably just jump around today. I'm getting near the end of this, and so I've gotten a little bit more lazy. I have reviewed this several times, this Torah portion, and I am really excited to talk about it. But I'll also be happy when I'm done with this project because I'm kind of ready to move on to new things. Anyhow, Parshat Va'etchanan, I forgot what does Vaetchanan mean. Oh, I pleaded, right. I pleaded. Yeah, that's why we'll start with that. Again, this is the redactor. The redactor is kind of, I'm not sure exactly. I think the redactor here, just following up on my theory from last Torah, from the last week, was I think the redactor here is just, it's just a continuation of kind of like the redactor's approach, which is the redactor here is basically kind of they're envisioning themselves. They've like put together this project. It's the Torah, and it's going to be the foundation of religious nationalism. I mean, I wish I knew the stories of the redactors who put together the Torah, because if we had the stories of the redactors who put together the Torah, it would really inform us so much about what they were really thinking when they did this. As it is, you don't really know, and so you kind of project on it. You kind of imagine what it is. So you have this character called God that's, you know, kind of understood within the universal currency of all the cultures around you. I mean, all the cultures around you have a similar currency that they call a god too, and I'm surprised that there weren't more atheists in the ancient world, because it seems like it would have been really easy to be an atheist back then, because people make all kinds of claims about their God and none of them come true. I guess it's no different from today. Like, people still believe in gods, and they still imagine that gods do things for them even when they never do, but I imagine that there were probably lots of atheists back then who all pretty much said the same thing I'm saying. People pray to their gods, they make sacrifices to their gods, they write about them, they do all this literature. This is like these texts are acts of desperation in some ways. They're like, but it's like each text. So like, what I'm trying to get at is that like this text, it had a function. It wasn't just something that was created out of nothing, that was grassroots, that people, took along with them, and um, it just became this upswelling source of meaning. It it's something that was created by redactors, by writers, by propagandists, and at the time that these texts were created, they had a specific intention. And oftentimes these texts were pushed on people who had authority, and they were pushed on to people who had less authority, or people who had no authority or no capacity. And they're simply told that this character, this God character, and the rules that are here, are things that must be obeyed. And it's the gullibility of the human character. I, I wouldn't say it's so much the gullibility as it's the capacity of the human character for cooperation and for like we have this deep-rooted instinct to cooperate, to kind of get along, to try to learn from our environment. And that whole process has just been completely distorted by religion. These texts are designed to manipulate people and to take advantage of the fact that people have that innate, instinctive sense of cooperation as a species. And this takes that and it really messes with it in a really big way. Because one of the first things that it does is it tells you that there's something that isn't real that is doing that same human thing with you that everybody else is doing. And that somehow that thing that isn't real is the most important thing that there possibly is. And it's in a lot of ways, religion is just a profound failure of the human imagination. You know, I mean, we're luckier now than we were in the past. I mean, we're actually extremely lucky now because now we have enough information to where we can really understand what the world is. We can understand what we are as a species. We can even understand how our brains function, you know. I mean, we're really lucky because we're in a point in human history where we've made so much progress and we're able to really understand so much about the world. I mean, we still don't have control over a lot of the things that matter, the things that some of the things they write about here. I mean, we still don't really have control over war. Um, you know, we're kind of ruining our planet right now with with the climate. I mean, we don't have our societies under control. But there but we know enough that we can honestly address a lot of the issues that come up in these texts. And we can say that collectively we found some solutions for them. And then there's other solutions. There's other things we really haven't found solutions for, you know. And I mean, I think that so there's this person who's actually been reading some of my texts, which really impressed me. And he was basically talking to me about how he felt that the Torah is a testament to the idea that the universe was created by like kind of like a loving God and that it, you know, it doesn't, there isn't any answer about life or the meaning of life. The only meaning of life is that we pass it on to the next generation and that we try to live ethically and that this text was like a source of ethics, you know. But I just don't know. I don't think I agree with any of that. I mean, I think that you don't have to tell people to reproduce for the next generation. It's completely hardwired into our evolutionary nature. I mean, there's literally almost nothing that will stop a species from trying to reproduce into the next generation unless the climate just completely undoes that possibility. And as for ethics, you know, I just I don't think that ethics come from anything other than how people choose to treat each other, you know? I mean, I don't see how we could possibly live in a world of ethics, honestly. I don't think that we are ethical. You know, the truth is, I don't think that we're ethical. I don't think that we're moral because I look at the very foundation of our society. You know, I look at how, like, almost every, not every country, but most countries that exist now, like, are preparing for war. They prepare for war. They buy weapons, they have militaries, and like the bigger they get, the more they prepare for war. And it's like I just don't think that we really have ethics. I mean, And I don't think that the Torah really teaches us ethics either. I mean, because the Torah itself just completely undermines everything that it says. Like everything that God says for you not to do, like God ends up doing a lot of those things. I mean, there's some things that I guess that their imaginary invention of a God wouldn't do because he doesn't have a body. So he's not going to covet his neighbor's things because he doesn't have a body to covet things with. And he's not going to like commit adultery because he doesn't have a body to commit adultery with. But, as an imaginary character, he basically undermines everything that he says in the text. Um, and then there's this strange character here of Moses. And Moses is a person with power. And this whole book, in a lot of ways, Deuteronomy it's the it's the meandering thoughts of power, like the obsession with power, what power like requires in terms of response. And in a lot of ways that really tracks with people's idea of God. I mean, for a lot of people, their idea of God is that God is something that's so much more powerful than them. And then it's like it's like they know that there's things in the social in the social hierarchy that are more powerful than them. And that's what makes up human culture for the most part. And then above that, there's like another hierarchy that's even higher than that. And that's God. And it's like, so that's, I think, this like, this idea of social hierarchy seems to be the foundation of God and what God is. Now, one of the nice things about Judaism, I don't know what to call it. It's the nothingness principle. It's like the idea that everything that you say about God will the God will be greater than that, or it'll be more than that. Like one of the things I hear a lot in the place I go to, which I always think is I I mean, as an atheist, I always want to argue with that because it's kind of it's just one of those arguments that religious people make, and they say, "Oh, God is greater than anything that you can ever imagine. You can never imagine what God is." And it's like, so by saying that something is greater than anything that you can ever imagine, it's a way of kind of like disabling your own natural human curiosity, your own natural instinct. And it's the same kind of thing that religious people have been saying throughout all of time. I mean, it's much better, even if I were religious, I would say, oh, well, God is something that you can imagine. Try to imagine God. Because if a thing is something that you can't even imagine, and like yet you're writing about it, you're saying it's real, then you are imagining it. Even if the thing that you're imagining is that you're imagining something that's so much more than you can ever imagine, you're still imagining something. I mean, you can't help but engage your rational mind when you're thinking about this sort of thing. So that's some of the language that goes into this. Anyways, let's do some reading. I guess if I get to two parts of this Torah portion today, I'd like to um, I'd like to get to the very beginning, which is the part where Moses is pleading with God. And then I'd like to get to kind of the ending where Moses is talking about like don't adopt the ways of the people around you. Because I mean all of this stuff is just really great grounds for kind of atheist criticism. But anyway, so let's go. We're gonna start with so we're in Vaetchanan, Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 23. I pleaded with God at the time, this is Moses talking, saying, I pleaded with God at the time, saying, O my sovereign Lord, you who let your servant see the first works of your greatness and your mighty hand, you whose powerful deed no God in heaven or earth can equal. So, I mean, in the text here, at the very beginning of the text, you have to ask yourself, so it seems like what the redactors are saying is the redactors are saying that there's a God and that their God is greater than all of the other gods. So that's the first thing they're saying. They're saying their God is greater than all the other gods. So it's not that they don't, they believe that, like, first of all, they believe that they have a God, and then they believe that there's all these other gods. So, and then he says, let me pray I cross over and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, that good hill country and the Lebanon. So then Moses basically, he wants to like kind of fulfill his mission. He wants to fulfill the things that he started doing. And so here the text is, I mean, this text isn't really about, in a way, like part of the reason the text has survived so long is because the text isn't really about Moses. It's really about you reading Moses and kind of being Moses. So it's like, and then you're supposed to take that into your life. So anyways, that's how I read it. But God was wrathful with me on your account and would not listen to me. God said, enough. Never speak to me of this matter again. So here in line three, not line three, I'm sorry, verse, what verse is that? Verse 26. This is where the text is like, so here's the character of Moses, and he is kind of reimagining the past. You know, I, I mean, the whole thing is a box within a box because even in the past, in the story, where the character made up some ridiculous reason, like he struck a rock when he wasn't supposed to, or he struck a rock in anger. Um, like even that doesn't really make sense when you think about it. I mean, from an atheist perspective, like there wasn't any God telling Moses to do anything, and it just it really it's hard to say what to do with this. It's like there's no God telling any Moses what to do about anything. And then here the character of Moses, who's a made up character, is saying that the thing that doesn't exist told him not to, told him that he's saying that the thing that doesn't exist is not going to let him do something that didn't happen because of some people that aren't real. And that's like the real, for me, that's like the real read of it. So there's like the thing that didn't exist, talk to the made up fictional person in the story who doesn't exist. And the thing that didn't exist told the person who's made up that because he didn't do something that the thing that didn't exist didn't really tell him to do, then he wasn't going to get to go someplace with the people who don't really exist either. And it's kind of strange when you really think about it. Okay. Go up to the summit of Pigza and gaze to the west, the north, the south, and the east. Look at it well, for you shall not go across to the yonder Jordan. So, I mean, I think that part of what really is kind of interesting there is that that is an actual real place. And, you know, you can imagine that. It's like here, the redactors have the idea of what it feels like when you go up on top of a mountain and you look around, you know, and that's considered kind of a spiritual thing. That's actually one of the most real things in the text, because in the text, you can imagine yourself in the shoes of the character kind of looking around the horizon. So that's a nice bit of text. Okay. Give Joshua his instructions and imbue him with strength, courage. For he shall go across at the head of his people, and he shall allot them the land that you may only see. So that's you know, here this is the idea of succession. I mean, I think that's not, even though Joshua's not real and Moses isn't real, like there's this idea that there's some kind of succession. It's obviously like you have to have some kind of a narrative tool. So the redactors are thinking, well, if we're going to move this story into the next part of the story, because I mean, what the redactors are trying to do, this is why I wish I really knew what was in the mind of the redactors at the time that they wrote this text. And also this, in some ways I feel like this kind of gets at the failure of language. Like because language and culture too, honestly. I mean, I have this theory that like we never really understand what previous human cultures were like. I mean, we think that we have this idea in our brain, and because we have brains, like we can somehow imagine and understand the meaning of like any culture in the past. And I mean, I think that, you certainly couldn't do really meaningful anthropology or archaeology unless you had some understanding of like some basic idea of what people were doing in the past. But the things that you imagine you think that they were doing may not really have any meaning at all. I mean, the things that people wrote, the things that they did, these are things that are buried under like 30 or 50 generations of dust, like people lived, they had entire lives, they wrote down these texts, they died, they became dust. The next generation came, they became dust. And it's like for the redactors at the time that they wrote the text, you don't really know what they were thinking. I mean, you know that there's some story here about coming into a land. So you know that that's the story. And you know that it involves some kind of conquest. So it's not this isn't a peace story. It should be. This isn't also a story about how to make peace. I mean, this is a story about warfare and domination. And then in addition to that, it has all of these ancillary things which are sort of attached to it. But the overarching narrative is the narrative of military conquest. And in the narrative, like there's this idea that like the people don't have as many resources or they don't imagine that they have as much as the people around them. So they're imprinting that into their story. So the story is like they're less than the people around them who have more, but somehow they're going to be victorious because they have this covenant with God, which is like, so they have a covenant with an imaginary deity. And so they think that because of their covenant with their imaginary deity, they're going to be able to have more than, not have more than, but they're going to be able. Oh, and also the other thing about it is like there's sort of like a limit on their ambition. So they don't want more land than it is promised to them. They just want their land. And they believe that their land was promised to them by God. But I mean, there's just, again, here, there's so many. I don't think that the redactors were thinking the way that people think about this when they're looking at it from like a colonialist framework, which is why, like, to me, these are just different kinds of. I live on a busy street. To me, these are different flavors of monotheism. I mean, there's the monotheism of colonialism and empire, and that's the monotheism of like Christianity and of Islam. And then there's the monotheism of tribalism. And that's kind of the monotheism of Judaism. And so here you have this monotheism of like a tribal culture. And at the time, there wasn't the same kind of like global empires that there are now. I mean, but there were big empires then, they were much bigger. And the idea was that these people, because they were being moral and ethical and following the covenant of their God, that somehow they would be victorious and have more than the people around them. And I mean, I think that the redactors of the text at the time, this had to have been written at a time of military victory. And so the redactors at the time they wrote this, I mean, they must have had the instincts of people who had had a recent military conquest. Maybe even they had a military conquest a long time ago. Like like a generation ago. And the intention of what they wrote here was for the next generation remember to remember the values and the lessons of their military conquest, and to remember that the reason that they had their military conquest and the victory that they had was because they remained faithful to the cultural traditions that were both an inherent part of the community that they were from, but also the community that is the values that are invented by the redactors. And so a combination of the cultural relics that are part of the inherent community that existed at the time that these redactors had power, and the values that the redactors put into this religious nationalist text are intended to be remembered for the next generation. So, I mean, the strange thing is that there really was democracy happening at this time. I mean, at the same time that this was being invented as like a tool of nationalism, democracy was also being invented and practiced in basically the same part of the earth. I mean, it wasn't that far away. And it wasn't just democracy that was being invented at the time. There were a whole bunch of different kind of ideas about how to do the world that were being invented at this time. The Torah doesn't talk about democracy. The Torah is like, this is a Hasmonean document, even though Hellenism is all around it. And although democracy wasn't really being practiced very much by the Hellenists by the time you got to Alexander the Great anyways. I mean, there was some kind of democracy, but it wasn't democracy the way that it was invented in classical Greece. I mean, by the time you got to Alexander the Great, Greece had, you know, the ambitions of empire. They had the same ambitions as the Romans. And so their democracy looked very much like Roman democracy. And in fact, by the time you got to Alexander the Great, I mean, any idea of democracy in Greece had been completely subsumed by, complete authoritarianism, which interestingly is kind of where the Roman Empire went to. I mean, the Roman Empire kind of drifted pretty quickly into authoritarianism. And so you have all of these different kinds of historical styles of how do we do societies. And it's interesting because they're all being practiced at the same time in the same place. It's like, the Mediterranean is sort of like this lab for how to do different kinds of societies. And this isn't just happening in the Mediterranean, it's happening all over the world all the time. People are always doing this. And this is one people and their set of stories about how to do it. And they've wrapped up their ideas about how to organize their society into a religious nationalist text. And they've given it the stamp of an eternal being. And that's what gives the text its meaning. Now, over time, the text takes on a new kind of meaning because, like I was saying a minute ago, I mean, the people who wrote the text, the redactors, they all die and turn to dust. But the language continues on. The language still exists. The symbols still exist. And so the symbols, that intercultural transmission between one generation and the next, becomes the thing that's sacred. And that's part of why the text is still held up as sacred. But it's not a good text for trying to get at a source meaning because I mean we've moved so far beyond this. But so the text becomes just like almost a form of abstract art. Anyways, I'm just wandering. Let's read some more. Meanwhile, we stayed on in the valley of Beth Peor. And now, O Israel, give heed to the laws and rules that I am instructing you to observe. so that you may live to enter and occupy the land that the Eternal, the God of your fathers, has given you. So again, this is all written in hindsight. The redactors, they're already living in the land. They're they're firmly ensconced in the land. So the redactors are doing foreshadowing. But they're also doing something kind of, I think that was a little bit unique and at the time. I mean, they were creating a text, kind of like retro engineering a text by creating this document that was supposed to be read as real, where the the authors of the document are telling the people who exist right now what they're going to experience in the future. So they're imagining the future from the perspective of the past. I mean, to me, what's interesting is that so this text is dated, you know. It's like it's at this particular point in history, it's dated. Even though they've done this really clever thing and they've imagined like 40 years ago or 1,000 years ago, whatever. The intention of this is for like this generation or the next generation. And I think that that was kind of like I don't think that was uncommon for sacred texts at the time. I mean, I think that there was always kind of like this relationship between what happened 40 years ago or maybe 100 years ago and what's going to happen like 40 years from now. And it's like, I think there's this kind of obsession in the texts with the recent past and the near future. And I don't think that these texts were really meant to extend into modernity the way that they have. I mean, I really think that these texts are extremely dated. I mean, they're so dated that they're just like absolutely meaningless in so many ways. And yet we've continued to drag the text through history and given them completely new meanings. Um, which shows the power of language. I mean, it's really a testament to language and to the preservation of words and symbols. So in a way, it's kind of it's like, in a way, I think we're kind of acknowledging our basic nature. I mean, like the things that survive between one generation and the next of a species is its DNA, its source code. Uh, I mean, and I think that we, on some level, as animals, we sort of recognize that the source code is. I mean, we don't really we didn't know it until this last century, but I mean, it was evident. It's always been evident because things come from very small things and become really big things. So it's evident that there's some kind of a process going on, but we didn't really know what it was. We didn't have a language for it. So in a way, maybe this is like a language thing. It's a cultural transmission. So we're acknowledging that language and symbols are what connects us from one generation to the next. It's words, really. Words connect us from one generation to the next. Everything else is something that is only going to be in existence when it's around. So at the time that the three-dimensional universe exists for you, that's when this matters. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I can get anything out of this or not. I'm trying though. Anyways, so then he says, you shall not. Oh, yeah, this is the one I really like. Oh, now, Israel, give heed to the laws and rules that I am instructing you to observe, so that you may live to enter and occupy the land that the Eternal, the God of your fathers, is giving you. So I've already talked about that, but the next verse, this is the one that really, this is like, for me, this is the atheist verse. Okay. You shall not add anything to what I command you, or take anything away from it, but keep the commandments of the Eternal your God that I enjoin upon you. So it's like absolute authoritarianism. Here's here's this idea that you can't ever, like, whatever is written in this text, you can't ever add anything to it or subtract anything from it. So it's it's like in a way the redactors are saying that, like the redactors are in a good place when they're doing the text. They're saying, the world is in a good place for us. Nothing's going to change. It's static. The text needs to stay static. And it's kind of a bad I mean, even if you're a religious person, it's really not a good impression of God because, the universe is very dynamic. The universe is very dynamic and it's changing. Human culture is always changing. I mean, human culture is always changing and it always stays the same, but it's very innovative. Human beings are innovative. That's how we got to where we were. And I mean, one of the things that religion tries to do is it tries to stifle human innovation. It tries to stifle human creativity. It always has. I mean, the greatest example of that I can think of is always Galileo. You can always go back to Galileo. He's like for almost anything because Galileo is the example of religions trying to stifle human innovation. It's like Galileo's like, oh, the earth revolves around the sun. And the church is like, no, uh, no, I'm not sure. I think that the church must have thought that the sun revolved around the earth, but I'm not sure exactly what they thought. But, they threatened, they put Galileo under house arrest. They banned him from publication. Um, And, he added to something. And here's God basically telling people, you cannot add anything or take away anything, but keep the commandments. I know he wasn't, God wasn't talking about science here. There's no mention of science anywhere in the Torah. Like, there is no science in the Torah. There's no scientific method. Science hasn't been invented yet. You know, it's not even imagined. It's just not even. It does. There's no. I mean, there's only one place where there's barely science in the Torah, and that has to do with cross-pollination of species, which I think is actually in this Torah portion. I'm not sure. Anyways, let's go on. You saw with your own eyes what God did in the matter of Baal Peor, that the eternal your God wiped out from among you every person who followed Baal Peor, while you who held fast to the eternal your God are alive today. So it's like, I mean, I hope this isn't real. I mean, what it seems to be saying here is that what the redactors seem to be saying is that at some point in the past, like if people were practicing goddess worship, or if they were practicing some something besides the heterodox the orthodoxy of of these redactors, then those people were all killed basically. And there's a lot of places here in the Torah where the Torah gets like incredibly particulate about exactly who to kill and where to kill them. And so I want to go to that now because I've only got so much time left in this portion, and I really want to read that part because it's another. I mean, I really, I do love this portion. I mean, as an atheist, though, I do have to kind of read it with my eyes as an atheist. And so I have to take this opportunity to deconstruct the text in ways that kind of reflect how I think, because I mean, I'm never going to get to say most of this in a synagogue or in a church, and quite frankly, nobody's really going to listen much to what I have to say here. So this is kind of like my space to sort of deconstruct the text in and to really focus on the things that really interest me. And the things that interest me are the things that are just such tremendous overreach. Things like places where the text just completely goes off the rails. And I guess the part of why I'm interested in the parts where the text goes off the rails is because it's kind of an insight into the redactors, and it's also sort of an insight into our own patriarchal culture. Because the patriarchy that is like embodied in the text here, like gets reproduced one generation after the next ad infinitum. And like, the millions and millions of people, the billions of people who exist in these monotheistic patriarchal societies, like have imprinted the same kind of patriarchy and the values of this patriarchy into the foundations of their democracies, their nation states, their kingdoms. And so this has become a blueprint for how to kind of exercise power as a patriarch in, all around the world. And I don't know if you would have needed the text to kind of reproduce the kind of patriarchal authority and the kind of militarism that's basically sprung up all over this planet. I think the text just does a really good job of telling you what men have been busy doing for like the last several thousand years. It just gives you another insight into it because it doesn't ever talk about it doesn't really talk about how to really make peace with your neighbors or how to get along with other people. It's a source text that gives you a sense of how to dominate another person and just the real idiosyncrasies of having power, like of having a certain kind of authoritarian power. And not the whole Torah isn't like this, but there's enough places in the Torah where it's like it that like for me as a pacifist, it's worth pointing out. And this is another one of those portions. So here's Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1. I think, is that right? Yeah, verse 1. When the eternal your God brings you to the land that you're about to enter, and possesses and dislodges many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, seven nations much larger than you. Again, remember, this is all just made up. So none of this really happened. This is somebody telling a story about the past and imagining how they got to where they are. And the eternal your God delivers them to you, and you defeat them. You must doom them to destruction, grant them no terms, and give them no quarter. You shall not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons, or their daughters for your sons. So it's basically talking about how, like, when you bond with the thing is that, so this is one of the problems with authoritarians when they come to power and when they have these kind of ideas of power is that they don't understand that the very mixed kind of culture that got them to where they are now, like, is the one that they're trying to control. It's like what's happening in the United States right now. Right now, the United States is like going through one of its many periodic crises where it like really tries to control immigration and it tries to control who's coming in. And they get kind of insane with the nationalism. I mean, a new kind of nationalism is being created right now before our very eyes. And it's like, I'm not sure exactly what kind of nationalism it is because it's still sort of being defined. I mean, but this is another kind of nationalism. And I mean, it's just right away, it's acknowledging it's basically like it's one of those like opposite Torah things. Like this is basically telling you the opposite of everything that actually makes cultures fluid and kind of makes them breathable and makes society tolerable. So, anyways, you shall not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from me to worship other gods. God's anger will blaze forth against you, promptly wiping you out. Instead, this is what you shall do. You shall tear down their altars, smash their pillars, cut down their sacred posts, and consign their images to the fire. For you are a people consecrated to the eternal, your God. Of all the peoples on earth, the eternal your God chose you to be the treasured one. It is not because you are the most numerous of the people, indeed you are the smallest, but it was because God favored you and kept the oath to your fathers that God freed you with a mighty hand and rescued you from the house of bondage. Know therefore that only the eternal your God is God, the steadfast God who keeps this covenant faithfully to the thousandth generation of those who show love and keep the commandments, but who instantly requites with destruction those who are disloyal, never slow with those who are disloyal, but requiting them instantly. Therefore, observe faithfully the instructions and laws and rules which I charge to you today. I mean, that's really clear. That's a really, really super clear idea about what the redactors are thinking. The redactors, and it's this, you just can't say that the Torah isn't gendered. It's totally gendered here. This is a male God, and it's the reflections of male patriarchs. It's not just the reflection of male patriarchs, it's the reflection of male authoritarian patriarchs who have like a tremendous amount of power. So this is like people who are at the top of a social hierarchy, and they want to retain their power, and they want to retain the thing that they've set up. And so one of the things that they do in order to create the foundation of the thing that they've set up is they create this invisible deity that basically is going to monitor you 24/7. So it's like they're going to take your capacity for monitoring your environment for safety, like your base instincts as an animal, which should mostly go toward monitoring the world to know if you're safe or not. But once you've, like, the whole reason you move into a society and the reason you live around other people is so that you can feel safe. And once you have safety, you should be able to let go of that anxiety and just enjoy your life. Then what you have to worry about is, worry about death or worry about the future of your kids. Like, worry that your kid doesn't get into a bike accident or something. But you should be able to just relax and enjoy your life. And because like the species has achieved what it needed to, it created a safe environment for the members of its species. And at that point, the culture should be able to just relax and enjoy itself and have a good time. But here's the patriarchs with their anxiety, you know, they're still addicted to war. They're still addicted to their roles as patriarchs. They're still addicted to their authority. Like maybe social hierarchy was important for hundreds of thousands of generations of human evolution. Maybe social hierarchy was like the most important thing we could be in order to survive as a species. I don't know. But you don't need social hierarchy once you have a stable environment, once you have a stable community. But no, we've said no. It's not enough that we have stability. It's not enough that we have housing. It's not enough that we have education. It's not enough that we have food. It's not enough that we have medicine. All of the things that make our society stable. It's not enough. These patriarchs have to go around and still like continue to jeopardize us, jeopardize our future, jeopardize our economies, jeopardize our families. And they have to get like drill into our brain, into that part of our brain that is about our instinct for like looking around for safety and making sure that we're safe. That's like what helped us survive as a species you know, for thousands of years. And going back in our evolutionary nature, it's deeply rooted in our instincts as a species. And they've just said, oh, we're gonna hijack that part of the human instinct and make that part obedient to God. That's gonna be that's gonna cleave to God as security, and it's gonna be associated with militarism, with patriarchy, with religious nationalism, and with ethics. And that's what's going on in the text. That's what this is. And but then, there's more too. It's telling you some of the things that it did. It tells you what it did. It didn't just imagine these things. These aren't things that came up out of nowhere. Instead, this is what you shall do. Tear down their altars, smash their pillars, cut down their sacred posts, and consign their images to the fire. Everything here is about destroying the goddess worshiping aspect of the cultures. And in this particular line of the text, I mean, what you're really seeing in the text is that there is no Asherah. There's no companion goddess to the male deity God. This is a patriarchal God. This is a monotheistic God. This is a God that is like above all the other gods. And this God has chosen these people. And so for these people, they have to get rid of the goddess. Like the goddess and the gods, for them, it's like what it's telling you is that for them, part of the crisis in their civilization was people who wanted to be part of like goddess worshiping cultures and participate in whatever the ethics were of those cultures, even though the Yahwist tradition itself had a goddess aspect of it going way back in time. So here, like in Jewish tradition, they're like, oh, well, it just got, reinterpreted into the Shekinah. Like the Shekinah is where the goddess is now. But it's like, no, that's not what the text is saying. I mean, the text is being really clear here. The text is telling you exactly what to do. And and this dates the text. It shows you what's happening in the minds of the redactors at this time. And it's telling you like what they have to do in order to maintain their monotheism. Now, maybe it was difficult in those days to be a monotheist. I'm not saying that the pagan cultures that existed around the Levant at that time were any better than this culture. I mean, but this is it, it would just it would be better if no, I can't say it would be better. There's no this this is I'm making an argument with the dustbin of history. I mean, there's no talking about what would be better. There's no better. It's like this is the text. But what I'm trying to do is like for me, the text stopped here or way back there. Like the text stops for me back when like God isn't real. It's like okay, there's people in your environment who want to teach you that God is some sort of a real thing. And it's like, when you're a child and you're being indoctrinated, they say, you know, I'm sorry, but it's indoctrination. Even if you say God is beyond anything that you can ever understand, you're still indoctrinating people with a God. It's no different. And so for me, the text stops there. And so this is anyways. Well, that's it. That's Atheist Torah study for this week. Thanks so much. I'm almost caught up with the regular cycle of the Parshas. I'm actually the next Parsha is Ikev, and I'm actually going to do that tomorrow or the next day, and it'll be in alignment with the regular cycle of Torah reading. So I'll finally be caught up after going on vacation several weeks ago. But I've really enjoyed this. This has been a great learning experience for me. And it's given me a chance to get my yayas out and just kind of this is like my ranty. I look forward to like my ranty time of the morning where I get to rant about atheism and about the Torah and about monotheism because it makes me happy. And even if no one ever pays attention to this, it makes me happy to do it just because I got to say what I think. And there's something very empowering about that. I mean, there's something very empowering about how this technology has allowed ordinary people such as myself to be able to really document our own analysis. I mean, I'm not a scholar. I don't really know much of anything. This is just my own personal take on the text. But it gives me a chance to really look at it and and have a voice. And that's a good thing. You know, it's a good thing to give people a voice. It helps to reduce social friction when people have an opportunity to say what they think. And it also kind of lifts up something fundamental about society. I mean, there's actually a lot of different perspectives in the world. You know, there's a lot of different ways that people look at things in the world, and for the sake of convenience, we tend to filter all of that down into just like a couple of things we can really handle, and the rest of it we just don't pay attention to. And this technology gives us a chance before we're getting filtered out to sort of say what we think. So that's a good thing. Anyways, thanks so much. Again, this has been Atheist Torah Study. I'm Emma. And thanks so much and have a great day.